Welcome to today's edition of Corporate Learning Dialogues, a YouTube channel program sponsored by Uniquimia. Uniquimia is an organization based in Madrid, Spain, dedicated to professional development in business management. In Uniquimia, we have the conviction that the continuous training of professionals in organizations must keep pace with new technological opportunities and follow the changes in the global context. We work to create unbeatable learning experiences that foster the growth of professionals at the forefront, capable of converting knowledge into effective organizational skills to face corporate challenges in an environment of constant change. My name is Paul Esqueda. I'm a professor emeritus at Penn State University, and today we have Daniel Gil'Adi as our guest. Daniel is currently director of Integra Consulting Team, LLC in Florida. He's a professor in the areas of leadership, emotional intelligence, coaching, teamwork, and communications in various Latin American countries, in the United States of America, and in Israel. He's also senior consultant to organizations and communities, consults a broad range of companies in the service, automotive, manufacture, telecommunications, and consumer goods areas. He's an experienced officer, or he's a very experienced officer in the Israeli Defense Forces, exercising leadership in difficult circumstances. As a result of this, he became interested in how common individuals may accomplish extraordinary results, thus generating significant transformation in other individuals, organizations, communities under the most adverse circumstances. He is also author of 3 books in Spanish. One of them is Leadership and Personal Decision, published by McGraw-Hill in 2004, Leadership and Masculine Domain, published by Dolman in 1999, and Emotional Intelligence in Practice, published by McGraw-Hill in 2001. His academic degrees he's a postdoctorate in clinical psychology at Temple University, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He's got a PhD in clinical developmental psychology from Bryn Mawr College in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. He has a Master's of Arts in Clinical Psychology in the Psychology Department at Bar Ilan University in Israel, and a Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology and Physical Education from the Psychology Department, Tel Aviv University in Israel. So, welcome to our program, Daniel, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you for the invitation, Paul. It's always a pleasure. Only one caveat, because for me it's important. When I wrote the book, Leadership, a male domain, it was with a question.
Okay.
Because I always felt that most of the literature, most of the positions in boards, in CEO positions, VPs, was mostly white males. And my research was done around to see the difference between the exercise of leadership and men and women, and very related to emotional intelligence. And I find out that actually women perform much better in many circumstances than men, especially because they are, in my opinion, more sensitive, more open to change, more able to gather teams in such a way that they will perform much better. So simply to that caveat. about that book.
Oh, thank you. No, that's a good point. I saw this morning in LinkedIn that boards with a diverse structure, mixing women, men, and also people from different ethnicities, that they do tend to perform better than boards that are, like just one blend. Anyways, so my first question to you, Daniel, today is, in layman's terms, would you explain our audience what is emotional intelligence?
Well, emotional intelligence is the learned abilities. It's important to underline the learned. This is something that we all can learn, but it's the learned ability that helps us to deal with the challenges that life presents to us. Sometimes the challenges are internal, that has to do with the way that we perceive ourselves, our monkey chatter, our soap operas, the way that we judge ourselves and so forth, and the challenges that certainly life presents to us externally in terms of all the changes that we are going through. So that is, and it's based on certainly in two major components. One is personal mastery. That means how I deal with myself, how I am aware about my possibilities, I'm aware about my strengths and my limitations, how I have the emotions up to my service, how I think optimistically, how I increase my resiliency. So it has to do with me and myself, how I deal with this monkey chatter that 99% of normal neurotics sometimes are hijacked by that monkey chatter. And many times that monkey chatter is negative, how we judge ourselves, how we judge others, and so forth. So personal mastery, certainly me with myself. And if we are able to manage ourselves, then the second part has to do how we manage our relationships. And certainly relationships have been known to be the first predictor of happiness and well-being. That means the relationship that we have with our spouse, with our children, with our subordinates, with our bosses, with our community. That means the relationship is the base really of well-being and happiness. Therefore, how we are more empathetic, that means that we understand people where they are, where they come from, what they need, what is their dream, and we help them certainly to be the best version of what they are. That means that then we need to be able to work in teams, which for me is the crucial, really, strength of organizations, family, community. So the ability to develop that relationships in general is certainly the second component and extremely important in emotional intelligence. So how I manage myself, how I manage my relationship.
Great, thank you so much. Daniel, I wanted to know your reaction to what Yuval Noah Harari. He's an Israeli historian and writer, professor at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He said emotional intelligence and mental equilibrium will be the key leadership competence in exponential times.
Well, again, certainly I agree completely with what he says. I think that the basic threats that we are facing are psychological threats in terms of how we adjust to the uncertainty. Well, when we speak a lot today about VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, how we lead in VUCA, which is the new normal. So since the threat is psychological, has to do how we adapt to changing circumstances, how we are able to self-renovate, how we always are looking for opportunities rather than looking at things as a threat. Now, it's interesting that now it's like the buzzword that we, in terms of VUCA and so forth. But if I talk a little bit about my history, imagine my father was from Austria in the concentration camp, Nazi Germany. So imagine when he was a young boy, he knew the emperor. So he knew what an empire is, the Francis Joseph II, the Zweite. Then he went through the concentration camp where he needed to survive. He was helping his young brother and a cousin that became blind because he was hit by a Nazi guard. So he needed to imagine the adaptability that he needed to, and the resilience that he needed to exercise in order to survive. And then he went to this unknown country called Venezuela, to live in the jungle for a few months, full of malaria, typhus, and to be able then to start a family and a small business in order to survive. So imagine the capacity that this individual need to exercise in order to survive all these changes. And therefore, he always said to me, Daniel, remember, nothing is steady. You need to be able to adapt to whatever changes. But for that, never lose your spirit. Always have a dream. So he was talking about that, through his life. And that we are talking about, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And today, certainly because we are living a big threat that this generation has never felt, like the political changes, changes in religion, changes all over. So certainly the capacity to adapt to these changes is the key for us to be able to survive, and not only to survive, but to thrive in uncertainty and difficulties, because we see that as opportunities.
Yeah, that's really interesting and challenging. I mean, and even today, people talk about exponential times, which is, the pace set by the growth in information technology. But then, for example, a couple of days ago, Meta, the company of Facebook, announced that they were letting go 12,000 people. So you can see it's like a sign that exponential times are not so exponential after all. And
well, that is one of the key issues that Yuval Harari and professionals that in this area is that you need always to be in the process of self-renewal, always in the process of learning, because things are going to change, and sometimes you are going to be laid off, and you are going to need to go to a place where you don't know what is going to be required of you. So if you learn about adaptability, the process of learning, self-renewal, you are going to be having more chances to really do well in those difficulties, during those difficulties.
So let's switch gears a little bit here. What are the key competences of current and future leaderships, according to you, Daniel? Well,
first, again, what has to do with a person himself or herself. So for that person, really for himself, he needs, one is to be very aware, self-aware. What are my limitations? What are my strengths? It's like talking to the person in the mirror. What are my blind spots? What is the things that I need to be constantly be learning anew? So one of the first things is to be really self-aware. The second is the ability to really be comfortable with uncertainty. and to be, therefore, to be able to take more risks. Because stability, certainly stagnation, is the enemy of progress. So therefore, that person himself, herself, need to be always in the look for new things, self-renewal, feeling good with conflict, adapting to new circumstances. So that is first, okay? Therefore, of course, to learn emotional intelligence abilities, tools, how to deal with their emotions, how to think optimistically, how to be more resilient. That means that sometimes life presents to us challenges that we are suddenly, we have failed tremendously. So the question is how we learn from that and how we stand up and we continue walking our path. And for us, we need to really be aware of our principles or our values, what is the dream, what is the thing that I want to do, and what is my personal mark that I want to leave for next generation and so forth. So that is the first part. The second part has to do certainly with me, the leader and others, in terms of how they are able to really truly understand who are the people that are within. So that means that they need to do the transition from boss to coach, to be able to deal with Bernard Bass many years ago presented the concept of transformational leadership. That means that you have to really understand what is each person needs and dreams, desires, capabilities, and how to help them do their best. That means that one size fits one. Before was like one size fits all. No, one size fits one. That means he has to be aware about the people that are around them and really help them to be their best. So therefore, he needs to be aware that he is playing in a soccer team, not a basketball team. Because the basketball team, you need a LeBron James, and the rest are feelings. This LeBron James can take the ball from one side to the other, and really, sometimes even make more points than the whole team altogether. A soccer team is different. A soccer team is that you need really good players all over, because sometimes you need 10, 20, 15 touches until finally you get a goal. That means that you need really to be aware about your team and how to create a good performance team. That means that for that, you need to be open to create open dialogue, you develop trust, to mutual accountability. That means that we are really accountable not only for ourselves, but for the people in our team. And therefore, we need to create this band of brothers and sisters. So I think that these are some of the capabilities or the qualities of the leader of the present and certainly the future.
Thank you, Daniel. I have seen you teaching in the past, and I think one of the things you do very well is that you challenge people in the classroom, and you challenge them to see themselves, in a real way, not just the fake view that you have of yourself. So I've always appreciated that approach, where you challenge people to look at things the proper way.
Thank you. Let me add only one thing that to summarize what I said. I know that will be that very simple, but I always say to people, you need leaders that will have a head, a heart, and a hand. That means a head means to be very creative, innovative, to be able to be aware of yourself, to really look at yourself and be willing to be humble, to be disciplined, to be courageous. A heart means that really you need to look at the people, to be empathetic, to be compassionate, to be able to understand that people are doing their best effort. If they are making a mistake, they are not planning the mistake, something went wrong. If there is a disruptive behavior, that means that there is an unsatisfied need. So therefore, to have the heart to try to understand what is happening there. And a hand, that means you always can lean on me. That means that you always be able to come to me and I will help you do your best. So.
Thank you, Daniel, for extending on that. If you were in the position to design the development roadmap of a potential corporate leader, how would you proceed? What would you do as a coach?
Well, they are certainly a very structured process, okay? The first process, I need to diagnose how committed that CEO or VP, manager, or whoever gets engaged in this process of coaching, how willing and able that a person is willing to engage in this process of coaching. And again, returning how disciplined he's going to be, how courageous he's going to be in terms of being willing to ask people around them how they see him or her in terms of their abilities, their limitations, and to follow up on that, because people really grow through others. Who are the people that really know you truly? The people that work with you, your stakeholders, your spouse, your kids, your subordinates, your peers, your boss, your clients, your suppliers. So you need to be willing to be courageous in order to hear from them how they see, and especially how they see your blind spot that sometimes you are not aware. So you need to be disciplined, you need courageous, and you need to be humble. That means you don't have to have the answer for everything. And how much are you willing to be helped by others? So first, we need to diagnose, how much that person is willing to get involved in this process, because this is a process, and sometimes a very painful process. Because to be hearing things that when you look at yourself, you say how marvelous I am, how right I am, and suddenly people are telling you things differently, and then you need to make a mindset change in terms of, what they are seeing and what is the gap between what I see and what they see. What is the gap between my aspirations and reality, which is called creative tension, So this is the first step. And the second step, then I encourage them to work through stakeholders. So I mean, they need to interview sometimes 20, sometimes 10, sometimes 5, stakeholders, people that are the subordinates, peers, boss. Sometimes they choose spouses, children, suppliers, clients, people that will help them really like a 360 alive, that they will help them always to be always accountable about the things that he said that he wants to improve. So he needs to then to choose stakeholders, interview them, bring to the coaching session what they say, and together we develop a number of behaviors that he is going to be willing to work on them, and always around a 30-day action plan. Then with that 30-day action plan, with those behaviors, he goes to the stakeholders and he said, look, guys, this is what I'm going to work during these 30 days. Please observe me, please help me. because after days, I'm going to go to you and ask you, what have you seen? So again, after a few months of this process, certainly, in my opinion, and when the person is humble, disciplined, and courageous, good things have more chances to happen. And then we do certainly evaluations every 2 months with the stakeholders and himself and or herself, how much he has or she has progress around the behavior. So it's behavioral coaching centered on stakeholders. So that is mostly the approach, in terms of, but the most important, how much the person is willing for the effort and to follow up on his willingness to be hearing from people feedback about his performance.
Well, thank you, Daniel. So we get to our last question. How do you envision the future of corporate learning?
Well, that is the $1 million question. Okay, because things are changing in such a rapid way that, but in my opinion, my approximation to the question, because this is something certainly that discussion is still in progress in terms of what to do in terms of the future of leadership development, corporate training, and so forth. And then certainly many opinions. But in my opinion, again, first it has to do one size fit one. Okay, because before people will go to these, leadership workshops and so forth, and they will have a very intense, workshop. Certainly, they will say that they have learned a great deal, but certainly when they came back home, sometimes they have difficulties applying that learning. So therefore, one size fit one. We need to understand what each individual needs in order to really thrive in this changing environment. So we need to really introduce more of the really one size fit one. Now, the other one is that it's extremely important, the difference between consistency and intensity. Intensity is when you go to this workshop 3 days, 2 days, very intense, a lot of material, but sometimes falls, through the cracks because life really hijacks them in the daily routine. So it has to do with consistency. That means that it has to be action learning, and that has to be highlighted, action learning through time. That means that very often during work, that people will gather around concepts to learn together in order to apply it on the go. So action learning. Now, the umbrella, in my opinion, one has to do with system thinking. I feel that people are really not thinking systemically. So, and system thinking, try to imagine your body. Imagine the relationship that has to be among all the parts of your body in order for you to function the way that you're functioning, that you will have a good life, a good life, 70, 75, 80, 90 today years. So the problem is that people sometimes look at the organization like a marble jar. A marble jar is not a system. You take one marble out, you have less marbles, but they are marbles. But imagine if you take the battery of the car. That's it, okay? So therefore, you need to understand system thinking in terms of the relationship that they are among the different parts in order to avoid the silo thinking. That my department, I am my department, I am my thinking, I have to take care of my people, rather than thinking what is the impact that my department, myself, my team has on others. So therefore, we have to create more of the kind of system thinking that to understand the relationship that there are among the different parts. So we need to teach that, in terms of, therefore, we need to gather people from different teams, from different areas, and to put them together in order to solve the issues that really they share, in order to create the future that they want. Therefore, what we call consulting teams. We gather leaders, we gather people from different teams, different countries, different cultures, in order to really together create that future that we want. Therefore, the most important thing, in my opinion, one, system thinking, to really act learning in action, and certainly teams. In my opinion, and coming from also from the military, one of the most extremely important emphasis that always is given is the team, band of brothers or sisters. So we are a soccer team. We are a team that if you take one out, something dramatically could happen. So we need to really to be taking care of our teams. So therefore, the companies will thrive more when certainly they will develop high performance teams across the board. And that the learning will be not only for the few, on the top. So everybody has to be involved. Therefore, the other umbrella is learning organizations. So we need to create learning organizations that we will always be in the process of learning and tapping on really where we are in terms of this process of learning. Always asking what have we learned, what we have done good, what we could have done differently, what we need to stop doing. And that process certainly has to be a continuous process. It's not that like to have a hiccup and now we are going to do, this particular thing that will alleviate the pressure. Okay, this is something that has to be part of the culture of the organization.
Wow, great. Thank you so much. That's a kind of a very deep reflection on corporate learning. But I think beyond corporate learning, it's more organizational learning and operating as a team. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. It's been a real pleasure to interview you, and I've learned a lot as always. So thank you so much. Take care.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, Paul, and hope to see you soon.
All right.